You just posted a great item to your favorite social media channel. Why wouldn't you just post it to all the rest? Well, there's a lot to consider, and we'll talk about some of it coming up next on For Immediate Release. Another fine podcast from the FIR Podcast Network.
This is For Immediate Release, the podcast for communicators.
Welcome to episode 248 of For Immediate Release. I'm Neville Hobson.
And I'm Shell Holtz. And if you have a small team, a limited budget, but you want your social media posts to get the broadest possible reach to the widest possible audience, you may want to think about cross-posting if you're not already doing that. But there are some caveats to this. So recently, Instagram announced that they are going to, as a HubSpot article puts it, deprioritize posts that have the TikTok watermark on it. This is something that we're seeing increasingly. We're seeing it on YouTube. We're seeing it on Instagram, on Twitter, is people sharing TikTok videos that have that TikTok watermark. So Instagram has said enough. We're looking for native content, and you will see less of that, even if the people that you are following have posted a TikTok video, regardless of how awesome it is. But that led HubSpot to do a post about cross-posting in 2022 that I thought was very comprehensive. And well done, and worth a short chat about this idea of cross-posting, which very simply stated means that content that you created once, you're going to post pretty much everywhere. And they note that this is good for small brands with a limited marketing budget, new brands that haven't produced much content, and those of you who are more focused on strategy than posting a bunch of stuff. But I think it works for larger brands as well. I mean, you've got this great video or this great shot. Why not share it across all of your social platforms? But there are some drawbacks to doing this. For example, if you have fans who are following you on multiple channels, they're going to see the same content across all of them, and that might get a little tedious after a while. This article also lists some cross-posting mistakes, which is to take exactly the same content and post it across all of these channels. And what you end up with there is stuff that is not formatted correctly. For example, if you're posting a video on YouTube and on Instagram, well, one is better landscape and the other is better portrait. There are actually large companies that hire channel managers, and their job is primarily to make sure that the content that is being posted to all of these channels is formatted appropriately, and working with the strategists on the communication team to make sure you should be posting it to this channel at all based on who's following you there. One of the obvious examples of that I can think of is something kind of frivolous and fun that you share on Instagram may not belong necessarily on LinkedIn with its more laser-like focus on business and business issues. But in particular, I was reminded of Instagram's move to deprioritize or to throttle back how many of these TikTok videos that you saw. So I thought it was worth mentioning. What do you think, Neville? You do some cross-posting just as I do.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's just thought that often occurs to me that it's a tricky path to navigate when your motivation for doing it is just to save time, and you just do a quick, metaphorically copy and paste job across LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and a whole host of other channels if you're using them, which in my view is totally not the way to do this. You mentioned some content's not formatted properly. That is very true. What occurs to me more than that, though, is that some content isn't right for some channels that might be right for others. Depends on who your audience is. So it requires you to know your audience for each channel. And if you're smart, you will have developed a channel strategy for each channel that, in a sense, specifies your audience and therefore what type of messaging you would like to expose to them and what the goals are at the end of the day with that. So that doesn't really fit with the model of cross-posting where it is a copy and paste job, which is what I see and hear anecdotally. A lot of people do that. Tools like Hootsuite, which I think is a really first-rate scheduling tool, amongst other things, make it easy. But there's a couple of interesting things with that, Shell. Twitter, for instance, doesn't allow you to simultaneously post the same content to multiple Twitter channels. And indeed, Hootsuite won't let you schedule posts that way. So that should maybe alert you to the fact that it's worth spending a bit of time to tailor your messaging to the channels. You could have the same message, but tailor the actual message itself and what it's saying. So that would include things like don't use a TikTok video if you're going to post to another social network because of that watermark issue you mentioned, Shell. So I get the pressure this cross-posting notion typically will reduce in terms of time, in terms of spreading your messaging across the widest possible parts of all the landscape. But those caveats are real, and it's worth spending a bit of time creating tailored messaging geared to each specific channel rather than a shortcut just to save time.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at TikTok in particular, there is a tendency to want to employ a lot of special effects. In fact, there are new tools, even mobile video editing tools, that are designed to make it easy to do those special effects. And people are looking for those on TikTok. I'm not sure they're looking for them necessarily on Instagram. And if they see one there, I think people who have even a little bit of savvy are going to say, oh, that was a video that was produced for TikTok. They just threw it up here. On the other hand, I was in Los Angeles last week for the topping out of a building that my employer has finished. It's a very tall high-rise in L.A., and got a lot of good photos, and we shared those photos across every channel that we have a presence on. It just made sense. All we're doing is sharing photos. It wasn't a video that was shot for a certain format. It's just, look, these are pictures that were acquired at the topping out of this building in LA. So I think you need to consider each case. But you mentioned Hootsuite. There's also Buffer. There's Sprout Social. These all make cross-posting easy. When I post on Twitter for episodes of FIR, as I will do after this episode is done, I would have loved to be able to just send that to the FIR Twitter account and my Twitter account, but as you noted, they don't allow that. So what I have to do is post it to the FIR Twitter account, wait a couple of seconds for it to show up, and then retweet it to my account because they just don't allow this. So these are some of the considerations that I think you have to keep in mind when you're cross-posting. Not that there's anything wrong with cross-posting.
No, I'm with you on that, Shell. I think that what I would say most of all is you need to be sure you know your audience in each channel. That will guide you in terms of what your messaging would be. And of course, in tandem with that is the specific strategy you have for each channel. Could be the same. No reason why it couldn't be, but typically it's not going to be the same because of the different kinds of audiences you've got on each of the channels. So that mistake is a common one. And indeed, the Hootsuite, the HubSpot piece talks about cross-posting mistakes, not specifically that one, but they do talk about posting exact same content. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, they say. And indeed, it can be a good exercise to look at how to differentiate a message per channel. That's kind of puts you on your toes to think more deeply about your messaging and your audience. So is this message going to resonate with this audience on this channel that's different to the audience on that channel. We need to do it differently. So it's helpful for that point of view too, I think. But nevertheless, I agree with you that the idea of cross-posting is a good idea when it's done well. And HubSpot does point out some best practices in their article, so some of which we've touched on. And I think this is something that is worth paying attention to, because we're all after saving time on doing what we can to communicate our messages. Just need to do it in the smartest way.
Right, saving time and expanding reach. And I should note that cross-posting is not synonymous with repurposing. Repurposing is when you take that video and, well, reformatting it is a form of repurposing. But when I think of repurposing, I think of the fact that we've written a white paper. We can make a couple of infographics out of that white paper. We can do some tweets out of that white paper. What other things can we do with that white paper to create different content on the same topic using the white paper as a source? That's repurposing. So I sometimes hear people talk about repurposing and cross-posting as if they're the same thing. They're certainly not.
They're not. You're totally right. They're not. But again, that adds to opportunity, where if you do this kind of lateral thinking, you have multiple opportunities to use the same content in different ways. So there's a good example, without question, of repurposing too.
So that'll be a 30 for this episode of FIR 101.